So people take information for granted. So Patrick, let me ask you, if I want to know the child death rate for last year in Sweden and in Sierra Leone, how do I do that? Do I just look online?
Yes, you can, of course, and you should, but at the same time, it's important for you to understand what kind of information exists for each of these countries. When a child is born and eventually dies in Sweden or in Sierra Leone, how do we collect and what kind of information?
So walk us through a practical example of a child death in those two countries.
Well, in Sweden, for example, when a child is born, there is a record of each of these births. If a child dies, there is also a similar record, including with a physician to document the causes of death. In Sierra Leone, this is not necessarily always happening, and you have much more limited information. So the quality and the accuracy of this is quite often more challenging.
So let's stick to Sierra Leone. How would the UN get an estimate for the child death rate in Sierra Leone?
What we do is to collect all the existing sources of information that exist for a country like Sierra Leone, the different surveys, the census information, and we evaluate them. We try to reconcile if there are differences between them, and we produce a global kind of a trend to understand the changes in the country.
Okay. So you collect these statistics also on adult deaths. Can you comment on broadly the reliability, again, let's stick to Sierra Leone, of a child death rate in Sierra Leone versus, let's say, an adult death rate in Sierra Leone?
The challenge for adult mortality is that we have much less sources of information. And in this case, the data that often are available, the quality is more problematic. So we have much less knowledge and accurate understanding of the trends and the levels of mortality in a country like Sierra Leone.
In the best case scenario, vital statistics about births and deaths come from complete civil registration with medical certification of the causes of death. When such registration is universal within a country, all events are reported in a timely fashion and all the information provided is accurate. Such sources of information can provide very useful statistics of vital events, potentially with short time lag and on a continuous basis. Traditionally, parents or relatives should go to the local civil registration office to report these vital events within a few days where they occurred. For example, to get a burial permit in the case of a death. But in many countries, especially more rural areas, this reporting often does not happen due to various challenges, for example, distance, cost, time, and often lack of motivation or perceived needs. When births do occur at home, someone with a health background often assists the delivery. For individuals, civil registration is a fundamental step for each child to get individual rights and benefits. Most importantly, school attendance now often requires a birth certificate, increasing the incentives for family to obtain one. Despite the incentive and progresses, only about 72% of the world population has a birth certificate. The situation is quite different for deaths, as there are few incentives to report deaths. This situation worsens even more in terms of reporting of causes of death, especially when the death occurred at home. The second approach to collect vital statistics in the absence of reliable vital registration involves surveys, conducted especially in the interval between each census to get more up-to-date information in the years following the last one. Most countries conduct many kinds of nationally representative surveys on different topics, for instance economic, labor, business, etc. But in countries lacking vital statistics, several types of demographic and health surveys are routinely conducted to collect retrospective information from a representative sample of households. For example, typically about 15,000 households. Altogether, over 1,800 demographic and health surveys, or DHS, and other similar surveys have been conducted worldwide since 1990. Several sets of questions were asked to each sampled woman between age 15 and 49 about their health and the health of their children, as well as a short biographic history for all her live births and siblings, and their survival status were collected. DHS type of surveys, however, provide limited information on adult male mortality or risk factors. This kind of information can then be used to directly compute mortality rates by age and sex among children for at least 5 to 15 years before the survey. By the more in-depth nature of such inquiries, surveys can often provide very useful mortality rates at the national level, and even subnational level when sample design and size allow. The heart of good demographic data is a reliable census. Since 1990, more than 700 censuses have been conducted through the world, including about 300 since 2005. In this case, the most common way is visiting each household to collect a small set of questions about their housing, all the household members and their characteristics, and eventually more specific questions on a subset of topics of people. In countries lacking good vital registration, censuses often collect, for instance, additional questions about the number of children ever born and still living for each woman in reproductive ages to indirectly estimate child mortality, and more direct questions on household members that died in the previous 12 months before the census can be used to estimate mortality rates by age and sex. Some, for example, in Sierra Leone, asked questions about who died during their Ebola outbreak. By their quasi-universal nature, censuses are the major source of information providing head counts about the whole population at all levels of geography, including at the community level. Due to the national scale of such data collection operation that requires visiting every household to conduct face-to-face interviews within a few days, the logistic and cost of such effort is so great that this kind of effort is typically conducted only about once per decade, or in some countries at the most, every 5 years. Worldwide, it still remains a challenge to have timely and accurate information at both national and local level for decision-making, monitoring and planning. Our knowledge about mortality levels and trends depend mostly on censuses and especially surveys.